And this is all set in Houston, Texas, and it, as the title would suggest, is basically Louis going around and talking to various sex workers, most of whom have pimps that seem quite brutal, quite violent, but they're sort of under the spell of these pimps. He meets a girl called Nikki, who's in her late 30s. She's only recently started to do to be a prostitute, and she's very sort of taken under the wing of this pimp, who she says, he's my protector, he looks after me, he got me out of several sticky situations. But then at the same time, when she thinks she's lost like some money from one of her clients, she gets really, really upset and feels like he's going to get violent with her. So there's that sort of distance between these sort of presentations of the pimps and things like that. And then he goes with like the police and goes on an undercover operation, goes with these sort of outreach workers, who a lot of whom are former prostitutes, now trying to sort of help the girls out. They've got these programs where they're trying to get them off the drugs and try to make them see that like these pimps aren't their friends, they're trying to make money off them. They focused on this website called, was it Backpage?
Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of it, but certainly something like that, which is almost like an advertising site, isn't it? Which
reminds me, the very first scene, he was on a website that reminded me of that thing in Top of the Lake, where all the Trick Advisor.
Yeah, that was the good one.
Saying this prostitute did this is what happened, blah blah blah, and they saw that. But the Backpage one is essentially, here's this prostitute, here's the number, give her a call, and you saw that in action, didn't you? You saw that with her the first time, where she's being advertised as being like 26 and she's 37.
What amazed me was you talk about an area, they said there was a lot of drugs, a lot of Where are all these people getting all this money from? She was getting a lot of phone calls while she was with Louis.
Well, there's a lot of truck drivers and things like that going through it, because there was another of the sort of recovering prostitutes.
That's weird.
Denisha. There's this guy called Keith, who's like a truck driver. They met at a motel. She didn't have a pimp. Sort of her pimp was in jail, wasn't he? T-Money.
Yeah, T-Money.
He was in jail, and she had a relationship with one of the other girls at the centre, and this strange relationship with this guy Keith, who said it was plutonic. They originally met and they were having a lot of sex. He was paying for sex with her, and then now he's sort of giving her sort of toiletries and stuff while she's at this sort of centre, and it's all very strange. And she says, I'm still in love with my pimp, because he's sort of, there's this sort of admiration. I don't know what the phrase, they sort of give him this validation, don't they, that they need.
A lot of it was based, and it's quite, having watched The Deuce a few weeks ago, we saw in drama form how the pimps go about, getting hold of the young girls, grooming them and making them feel special, but obviously also, as they showed in this episode, that fear factor as well. And I think the one thing that this episode did a really good job of was showing you the fragile state of these girls, and how it really was absolutely traumatic how they went from love to hate to fear in a matter of seconds for these pimps. That scene with Louis and this girl who worried about losing the money was the hardest thing I think I've seen. I had to watch this year.
I mean, I actually let out an expletive at one point. I can't remember which scene it was, but it was. I think it was the girl, actually, Savannah. She was saying something, wasn't she? And she'd actually sort of been a witness against her first pimp, who basically got her inebriated at a party, convinced her to be a pimp, and 1 hour later she was already sort of prostituting herself, basically, and against her will, and then she found a second pimp after, and she was only 18. This was all in the last 2 years, and it was all just seemed completely like, and she was actually going back into it. She was leaving the centre at the end, and
but she also was talking about going and getting a legitimate job, but others in the unit had said that she was already turning tricks whilst in the rehab.
But that's the thing, like, he talked to Nikki, didn't he? And Nikki had gone the other way. She was married, she had a normal job, like in a factory, but she said, I don't like normal jobs. But again, I think it's the fact that these women, they sort of meet these men who sweet talk them, give them validation, and before they know it, they're on this website, and they're paying for these rooms in these hotels, and they're just, making money off them, basically. Obviously, there was a reason for this, but he only managed to interview one pimp who was in jail. I think that was that side of the, he was telling this story about the men that manipulate these women, but obviously for legal reasons, he found it hard to talk to any of these men, and the only man he did find, I didn't find the conversation that scintillating between him and the guy who'd been jailed.
I didn't get the impression that this guy really kind of understood the power he had over women. I think he was more your kind of, I didn't get the impression that this was any clever person who was manipulating. He was more, that was his career, and he was just, but he was also in jail, so he wasn't that very good at it. How was your perception of Louis in this episode? Last week I was very much of the opinion that because this was America, that Louis was more subdued and more indirect with his questions. I felt a slight change in this one. I feel like, and I felt this, Louis done various episodes on the sex industry in America.
Mainly pornographic industry rather than this side of it. He's done 2 on the porn industry, didn't he? He
definitely feels... I definitely feel in this area of topics, other than the others where he talks about drugs and crime, when it comes to sex workers, he does seem a little bit more judgmental.
I don't think he's judgmental of the girl.
I don't necessarily. And maybe because he's a man and he doesn't understand. But definitely I felt more than last week. He's
quite innocent, isn't he? He's quite an innocent, I think, Louis. Yeah. I think that's why he works in these situations.
It's because he's more repressed himself.
Yes, But I wouldn't say he's judgmental. I think he's genuinely concerned for these girls.
I didn't mean judgmental, but I couldn't think of the right word.
I mean, I think he was appalled by what the pimps were doing. Yeah. I think there was that sense of being appalled that I think we all got. I found I was a lot more connected to this one than I was last week. So I think this one was a lot more focused, and I think the subject, the sort of people he found to talk to were a lot more sort of sympathetic, and you sort of understood their plight a lot more. So yeah, I did enjoy this one more. I could see what you're saying about Louis, but I still don't think he was as involved as he was in those ones last year in Britain.
And I suppose we should say that it's been announced that after these 3 have ended, there's going to be another series of him working with people in the UK. The first one's going to be working with anorexics.
I didn't hear that.
With eating disorders. No, that was only announced today. There was a BBC 2 press release. So after these 3, you're going to get another series of documentaries of Louis working in the UK. So it will be interesting to see that comparison. He is compelling as a storyteller and as a filmmaker, a documentary maker.